Welcome back to the show. No time for introductions. Let's get right to our first segment. We're opening this week with rapid fire headlines. Our first headline of the week, quote, David McCormick defeats Senator Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, reports the New York Times. Harris disappears from spotlight, vacations in Hawaii after election loss, reports Fox News. Texas Board of Education narrowly approves biblical material in public school curriculum, reports the Daily Wire. Hezbollah hits Israel with heaviest barrage in weeks, Politico reports. The Associated Press ran an article titled, quote, Republicans lash out at Democrats' claim that Trump intelligence pick Gabbard is compromised. Rising price of paying national debt, a risk for Trump's promises on growth and inflation, reports ABC News. Fans want Donald Trump to change commanders back to Redskins after winning presidency, reports Newsweek. After Trump's Project 2025 denial, he is tapping its authors and influences for key roles, reports the Associated Press. Trump plans to nominate Dr. Oz to oversee Medicaid, Medicare, and Obamacare, reports the New York Times. And Senator Fetterman admits Dems sort of lost ourselves on key election issues, reports Fox News. Finally, The Independent ran an article, quote, Mike Tyson refuses to retire after Jake Paul loss and calls out next opponent. All right, that wraps up our rapid fire headline segment for this week. Let's move on to our main stories of the week. This first one we covered last week on the rapid fire headlines, but it's worth bringing up again. Before we do, we want to say it's a difficult topic to cover from a nonpartisan perspective. We're going to do our best. We're going to make sure that we are not giving away any hints or clues as to our partisan leaning and making sure that we present this as best we can from a nonpartisan perspective as we do here at Politics for Teens. So this story, why is it worth bringing back up again? Because we finally, this is a battle that's been going on for 10, 15 years. And now we finally get to see, as it unfolds over the next several months, up leading to January and then after January, we get to see the politicians finally come face to face with something that they've largely ignored and left up to the influencers, podcasters, and whatnot to debate back and forth in terms of the culture war. And that is, of course, transgenderism and specifically what to do with transgenders and bathrooms. So, as we talked about last time, the first transgender congressperson was elected during this election cycle. And now people on Capitol Hill are trying to figure out how Congress is going to react to this. Now, remember, Congress is controlled by political parties, depending on what party has the majority. And right now, the Republican Party has the majority. So it's kind of in their court to determine how they're going to move forward with this issue. Representative Nancy Mace has now proposed legislation that would make it so that transgender women, people identifying as women who have the biology of a male, would not be able to use the women's restroom, but use the male restroom. Let's see what she has to say about her piece of legislation and its impact.
Well, I filed a resolution this week that would ban biological men from women's private spaces. So that would be the bathroom, changing rooms, locker rooms up here on Capitol Hill. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm also filing a bill that we're giving you exclusive copy to and copy with that would ban biological men from women's restrooms and women's private spaces in every federal property across the entire country. So I'm going to do everything I can to protect women and girls here on the Hill, but also all across the nation.
All right, there's her talking about her piece of legislation that she's trying to get through. Let's see what Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, had to say about this issue when he was confronted on it. You'll remember, right, the House and Senate, both controlled by Republicans. Speaker Mike Johnson's going to be able to play a key role in this kind of issue. Let's see what he has to say about it, what his thoughts are.
I just want to make a statement for all of you here and be very clear. I was asked a question this morning at the leadership gaggle, and I rejected the premise because the answer is so obvious. For anybody who doesn't know my well-established record on this issue, let me be unequivocally clear. A man is a man, and a woman is a woman, and a man cannot become a woman. That said, I also believe that's what Scripture teaches, what I just said. But I also believe that we treat everybody with dignity. And so we can do and believe all those things at the same time. And I wanted to make that clear for everybody because there's lots of questions. But that's where I stand. I've stood there my whole life, and those are facts.
All right. The transgender representative in question, who currently goes by the name Sarah McBride. Let's see what this person had to say in response to some of the discussions that have been going on. This is the representative from Delaware.
Look, this is a weird and bizarre obsession with trans people on the part of the Republican Party. Because whenever you see a politician or a political party focus in on an issue that impacts a handful of people in a handful of places, you have to ask yourself why. And the answer to that is they are trying to distract. They are trying to distract from what they are actually doing.
All right, so like I said, very interesting, mainly because it's forcing politicians and people in political office to really consider this debate that's been going on in the culture war for quite a long time and has largely been kind of pushed away from the actual politicians themselves onto the people and the influencers and podcasters that are responsible for some of these ideas going around. And so now we get to see how the politicians actually are going to react. They can't avoid this anymore. If they try to, that is indeed itself a response to it. So now we get to see which way they're going to go, and we'll continue to see this unfold as it does. And it's very interesting, and it's going to make a lot of people upset either way it goes. And so we will see, and we'll certainly be here to report on it as it continues. Let's move on. World War III. This has been going around, talked about quite a bit. Let's check in with the Russia-Ukraine war. So 1 week ago, we got this article from the New York Times, quote, Biden allows Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range U.S. missiles. All right, so the Biden administration is now allowing Ukraine more freedom in terms of how they're going to counterattack Russia. 6 days ago, 2 days after that article, we get, quote, Moscow warns the U.S. over allowing Ukraine to hit Russian soil with long-range weapons, reports the Associated Press. Russia releases a warning saying, hey, cool it. Quote, the Kremlin warned Monday that President Joe Biden's decision to let Ukraine strike targets inside Russia with U.S.-supplied longer-range missiles adds fuel to the fire of the war and would escalate international tensions even further. All right, then 5 days ago, a day after that article, we get, quote, Ukraine fired U.S.-made missiles into Russia for first time, officials say, reports the New York Times. So, reportedly, we have Ukraine firing U.S. missiles into Russia, and then now we see, quote, NATO and Ukraine to hold emergency talks after Russia's attack with new hypersonic missile, reports the Associated Press. So the war seems to be only escalating at a point where many people were hoping it would begin to de-escalate. We'll have to continue to wait and see what happens, but certainly it's heating up. All right, we got a couple of cabinet talks we need to go through, updates that have to be done. First off, Matt Gaetz has refused the Attorney General spot, turned it down, and he's come out and said he will not be returning to Congress. So that leaves Matt Gaetz some options in terms of his future. He really has quite a bit of freedom to choose what he wants to do, if he can run again for office or whatnot. We'll see what happens with that. But he's been replaced by Pam Bondi, who, according to CNN, is more conventional than Gaetz. Bondi was the first woman attorney general in the state of Florida from 2011 to 2019, and she served Trump as a defense lawyer during his first impeachment trial. So she's obviously a Republican, and she's got some history with Trump, working with him, and so a foreseeable pick. All right, now we get to the second cabinet kind of headline here. This is a teenage show with a teenage audience, so we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this headline. However, there's a lot of controversy surrounding Pete Hegseth. According to Forbes, quote, Hegseth cabinet news, Trump's defense secretary pick gets positive poll results despite sexual assault claim. Now, if you want to do your own research on that, we're not going to cover too much of that on the show. Like I said, this is a teenage and family-friendly show. We're not going to get into certain allegations that are flying around. Meanwhile, the Washington Post ran an article, quote, Pete Hegseth's army unit in Iraq was rocked by a war crimes case. So whatever the case is, when you get nominated for one of these cabinet or key positions in an administration, the opposition has full rights to come at you, full swing, and you should be ready. Now, slander, obviously, no one should partake in slander. All these things must be done with respect and proper reporting. Certainly, we run into issues with that in terms of media and parties and whatnot, but this is to be expected. And it's to be expected more so as this continues as we get closer and closer to January, to Senate confirmation trials. We're going to continue to see some information come out among different candidates and whatnot as we see if they're fit to hold the positions they've been appointed to. So, all right, that's all the time we have for this episode. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and we will see you next time on the 10-Minute Podcast.